Yo dude, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you how to recreate the scheme for the Necron army the 40 Hours of 40k community came up with. This is a fantastic paint scheme that Mike Mutiny created. I've put some of his links down below so you can check out more of his stuff. But the guide was created by him to help 18 different artists come together as a whole and produce one unified army. An army that you could win and help charity all at once. Just in case you missed the thumbnail, here's some images of the army. As you can tell, this is a beautiful Necron force. It contains a wide variety of units, command choices, everything you could really need to play Necrons on the tabletop. This is a great force, and you can get this army by bidding on it in a silent auction where all proceeds go to help a charity called CALM. CALM stands for the Campaign Against Living Miserably, and is a sort of helpline essentially to make sure that people that are struggling mentally really get the support that they need. This is a sensitive subject and it's difficult to talk about for a lot of people, but it is something that we need to talk about. We need to be a bit more open about, and certainly men's mental health is something that is pushed under the rug quite a lot. You're told, be a man, you know, stop crying, stop this, stop that, just bury it and get on with things. And that's not helpful at all. So if you're somebody that needs help, remember that charities like this are around just for you. And there's links to their stuff in the description below. It's a charity that I believe in quite a lot. I've helped out several times in the past because I have friends that are here simply because these exist. And unfortunately, on the flip side, I have friends that are no longer here because this charity didn't exist. So if you want to support a fantastic charity and potentially bag yourself a Necron army, there's details in the description below. You can head to the 40 Hours of 40k website for more, and of course all their stuff is linked as well. So a big thank you to Andrew and Kerry for creating the 40 Hours of 40k community, and for Bobby for inviting me to join that and help out with this army. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. But now for those of you maybe not lucky enough to win the army, here's how you can paint your own. Let's get to it. Now, when I started this video, I was planning on using Camotep the Crooked, which I painted during the same weekend that I painted the Flayed Ones on screen here for the army. Unfortunately, some of that video footage has been corrupted, and there's no way of me getting that back. I unfortunately can't even go back to the stream that I shot where I created the Flayed Ones, or sorry, painted the Flayed Ones, because that footage is now no longer hosted on Twitch because it's too old. So instead, this morning, in 2 hours, we managed to paint this guy. To be fair, 2 hours isn't a bad shout for doing this, following the guide made by Mike Mutiny to ensure that it sort of complied with the same standards as the rest of the force. So I'm impressed. That means that you can do this in 2 hours a mini, and this one's a little bit more complicated than some. So things like your warriors and stuff like that, you might be it down into an hour. That's not bad. So without further ado, let's get the painting. That was my girlfriend texting me. Cheers, hon. I'm not cutting that out. So I'm starting this off using an airbrush because this is something I need to get done quickly. You don't have to. For your undercoat, you can use a rattle can instead of the airbrush. And for your base coats, I'm using the Scale 75 Dwarven Gold because I prefer the way it goes through an airbrush than using something like Retributor Armor, which I wouldn't feel comfortable airbrushing so well. I know you can, I just find that GW Golds tend to be a little bit tricky in the airbrush, and sometimes even on an aperture of my size, can clump that up. Next, we're going to give everything a good wash of Reichland Flesh Shade, and then we're going to do something else in a second to really help get into all of our recesses and really bring about that battle damage. Like I said, all of this you can do with a brush, you don't need an airbrush just yet. So now while that's down, we're going to get some Rhinox hide and thin it down to a wash. Just remember, guys, wash is a technique, not washes are necessarily products. You can make a wash out of anything. In fact, we will later on in the video. Once all that's dry, get your base gold back, whichever one you used, thin it slightly with water, and start working upwards on all of the gold parts of the Mini. You can see here, after you've added a layer or two of this, there's a bit of a difference between what you had with the wash and what you've got now with the finished product. What you're looking to do here is create a set of blends to start giving a richness and an interest to all of the bits of gold on the model. After all, there's quite a lot of it. It can be a little bit overwhelming. Once that's done, we're going to take some Stormhost Silver, mix a tiny amount of gold into that, and hit all of our highlights. Remember to do underneath any of the bits of battle damage to help give it a nice 3D effect. And of course, get all of the edges as well. When you're applying an edge highlight, it's predominantly going to do one of two things, which is to enhance the detail that's on the miniature. That's how the Heavy Metal team developed their paint style over the years, because they wanted to showcase the detail on their minis. Once you've done all of that, get yourself some lead belcher, or in my case the Vallejo Model Air Metallic Gunmetal, and hit any part of the miniature you want to be painted silver. I'm also painting the head silver, and I'll explain why later on in the video, despite the fact it won't stay silver at the end. Now, to wash this and get the absolute maximum contrast, we're taking some Nuln Oil and some Black Templar contrast paint mixed 1-to-1 to give us some really dark shadows and recesses on this. We want it to stand out from the gold, which is nice and bright, as much as possible. And then once that's done, take some more Stormhost Silver, thin it a little bit for some better control, and then start hitting your edge highlights on this. And again, this is going to show all of the detail on those silver areas. So you've done all of the metal parts of the miniature now. You've got the gold done, which is the main body of it. You've got the silver done. Now it's time for the blue. We've got some Araman blue, and you're going to need a few coats of this. So thin it down, get a decent base coat consistency, and then just start working through until you get to the point where everything is nice and opaque. And as you can see, one coat really doesn't do it. I think in the process for this, we used 3. This is the second coat going on now. You can see we're starting to get better coverage, but when this was dry, I still wasn't quite happy with it. So we went in with a 3rd coat to make sure we got a really nice smooth foundation for the next part of our painting. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're taking quite a lot of Colia green shade. Some might say too much, but don't worry, it's okay. And we're applying that all over the surface of our armor. Now, anywhere that we need a little bit more, we're just going back to one of the little pools that we've got on our model, bringing that back up into the brush using its own capillary action, moving it to another part and putting it on there. If you do this and you find you've got too much on the Mini, by all means, just sort of wipe some away on your palette or a tissue or whatever you've got to hand. Not your hand. Don't paint your hands. The reason we're doing this is we want to get a nice solid set of gradients on the model in our next step to try and build up the shape and shading on the armor. By putting a very thick layer on now, we're tinting the color of the armor panels rather than just applying it to the sort of recessed areas like the battle damage and the little lines between them. So for the next step, we're going to be using that Araman blue. We're going to start bringing everything back up using several thin passes of this paint. We want to just work up on those surfaces. We want to leave nice, darker, recessed areas in certain points on the armor to help showcase the shape. So where you've got a nice bit that comes up like this and then bends around again, let's get a nice darker area here. Let's get a darker area towards the bottom. And we achieve this by just thinning down our paint nicely, building up several thin passes of it. Now, to begin with, you don't need to use a glaze. You can just use some very thin paint. You don't have to go quite as far as a glaze. And if you're having problems working out the difference between the two, check out this video above, which I've done on how to thin your paint properly. Watch that video, you'll get a good appreciation of it and a bit more practice, and you'll be fine. Trust me. While you're watching that video, though, why don't you subscribe to the channel and maybe give this video a cheeky thumbs up? If you're really enjoying it, why not come over onto Twitch, where I stream 4 days a week and you can see me painting models, ask questions and get answers in real time. And if you're really enjoying this video, why not even consider becoming a Patreon? Over on Patreon, we have videos just like this every 2 weeks. We have a written guide every single week for you to follow. And we've even got things like lessons and private tuition as well. So if you're interested, links are all in the description below. Hopefully, we'll see you in the streams. And this is it after all of that blue has been laid down. Don't worry if yours isn't as smooth as this, and this isn't even particularly smooth, because I'm going to show you a way of making it look smoother than it actually is soon up. Using some Temple Guard blue now, we've thinned this a little bit with water to help get a nice edge highlight going on. And we're making sure we hit all of the high points of the miniature, as well as anywhere where there's some battle damage. We're also, though, going to use this to add on some just painted battle damage, which if you put between a strong and a weak point in your blend, will help to push the blends across. It'll make things look a lot more even than they actually are. So by doing it here in this corner, for instance, it helps to smooth through the transition point that we've got, making our blend look like we've spent a little bit more time on it, certainly from a distance. We're now taking some Balaroth blue, again thin slightly with water, and we're hitting all of our highlights again. Sometimes you just need a little dot to help provide a little spot highlight to something. Sometimes you will want to do a full stroke of it like this. And again, make sure you get all of your edges as well. This is all to bring that detail out, really get that attention put forward on the work that the sculpts have done on the model. So earlier on, I painted the face silver for a reason. Hawthorne Grey is another quality example of Games Workshop making utter shite bright coloured paint. I haven't found a single white or off-white colour paint they've made that's actually been any good. Celestra Grey is about as bright as it gets before it gets bad, and even that can be a little hard to use. So we did ourselves a bit of a favour by painting the face area a bright silver while we had that paint out, because of course we were speed painting this. 2 hours to get the model done in this standard is kind of the realms of my speed paint, I'm afraid. So we did that, and we applied, I think, 5 coats of Hawthorne Grey before I was happy with it. Whatever you've got to do to make it work, make it work. But frequently you'll find when using, especially a light colour paint, to be fair, regardless of brand, there will be times where you just need to help it along a bit, and putting on something brighter underneath to just help it get there is usually the way around it. For painting things like white, yellow, very, very pale blues and stuff like that, this is a great tip. So think about that next time you're painting something that requires one of those colours. So now we're getting our Hawthorne Grey back down on the miniature in very much the same way we did with the blue earlier. We're applying thin coats of it in smaller and smaller stages at a time to make sure we've got a nice contour on the model, a bit more of a gradient, a little bit more of an interesting part of the mini. Now, whilst I didn't like this to use as a base coat, even over the silver, which certainly helped it out instead of going over the gold, I do quite like it for this purpose here. So GW, well done. For this particular purpose, the product works really well. All you've got to do is thin it slightly with a little bit of water, and then, like I said, paint in some slightly smaller areas each time to give you something that has a nice transition from our darker greys that we've tinted with that Fenrisian grey up to something that's very much approaching white. Shade down on the chin and up on the forehead to get a nice natural set of contours. Next, we're adding in some rust grey, and I wanted to put a bit more contrast in on the mini here and there. So we put a little bit underneath the eye socket, just to be sure we've got a nice shadow there. We also started putting it into a few places on the face, and then I figured, because there's no mouth on this guy, I wanted to do something to help his chin not look so plain. So we started adding a few bits of battle damage to it. Now I'll show you how to make this pop a little bit more later on, but for now, just concentrate on getting a nice thin line of this rust grey where you think battle damage could or should be. I'd look for areas that are nice and open that could do a little extra help to give them something so they don't look too boring. Now we're using some Morrow White from P3 because White Scar is absolutely terrible. I would actually rather eat my own foot than paint using that paint. And all we're going to do here is do a nice edge highlight. But we're also going to take all of our battle damage and make it pop out a little bit more by adding in a highlight just underneath where that stroke of paint is. What this does is it produces a nice bright area underneath the darker area and gives it a 3D effect. I'm also adding a little bit of white to the eye as well to make sure we've got a nice bright hit to it, because in the next step, we're going to paint the eyeball. And what we really want to do is have a nice, simple, easy to follow eye. So we're using some Magos Purple contrast paint. Don't put too much on the mini. If you do, just wick it away and like wipe on a tissue or something else, same as we did earlier on with our washes. All you want to do is make sure you get good coverage on the eye itself and let it pool into the shadows. By the time this goes over our rust grey, our Hawthorne grey and our white, we'll get a nice gradient of purple across the eye lens, and it will give us something that's easy to replicate across an entire army. I think for the sake of literally a minute and a half's work or so, that looks pretty good, and certainly I'd be happy with that on the tabletop. Last thing we're doing on the miniature is the hand claws, the big blades. We're using some Thramar black. You could use any good black. Abaddon black is fine. And once they've been given a base coat, we're taking some Liquitex white ink thinned 1-to-1 with Flow Improver through the airbrush, and we're just going to start building up a light and shadow layer. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as a value layer, which is its correct word, correct names rather. And all you're doing is you're making some parts of the model brighter, and you're leaving some parts nice and dark. That's why we base coated it with that black earlier on. If you go too far with the light, you can always come back in with some black ink or similar. But essentially build some up to bright white, and then take some Magos Purple contrast paint, thinned just 1 drop of Flow Improver, say 5 drops of paint, and slowly apply that over the blades. If you do it all in one pass, or try to, it won't work. You'll overload the paint on that area of the miniature. It will spiderweb and look terrible. So keep going with some nice thin coats until you're happy with what you've got. You should have a nice surface like this, full of light and dark. I've then taken some Genius of the Purple, thinned it with a little bit of water, and we're using this to hit all of our highlights. So I hope you find this video useful and informative, guys. If you have, great, give it a like, give us a sub, all the usual things. But the real message here is to go and check out the 40 Hours of 40k community over on their Facebook page. Have a look at the event when that goes live next Saturday. You'll be able to watch a load of their streamed footage all over that weekend. And it means that you might even stand a chance of winning an army painted exactly like this. You won't have to have painted all of it. You can support charity at the same time, and it's a really worthwhile charity as well. So I really, really encourage you all to check that out. I'm going to leave you with some beautiful pictures of the army worked on by the rest of the team. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Peace out. There you go. So once all of your blue has been done, you've got a nice smooth sort of take 2. So now that all that's down, we're going to get some Rhinox hide and thin this down to a wash consistency. Remember, washes are, well, it's just quite a nice thin coat. We're adding this around the eye for So we're back to our Ulthen Grey now, and we're using this to start building up some contour, bringing up some glazes, some different, no, just not. Build it up over several passes. Don't try and do it all in one. Arse.